In this episode, I'll be discussing why John Cassavetes was perfect in film noir movies. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast exploring storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, theater, among other areas of the arts. For those of you who follow my channel, you will know that John Cassavetes is my favorite filmmaker. He is known as the Godfather of independent filmmaking, and often people think of him in that way, in the films that he wrote and directed. However, of course, he was also an actor. He acted in a number of his own feature films, as well as many other films and on live television, and even some theater early in his career. And he went back to the theater later on in the 80s and staged some plays as well. But he was in a number of film noir movies, and also was the star of what people may consider a film noir television show called JOHNNY STACCATO. And his first debut feature film was in a film noir, that is The Night Holds Terror. You may even consider his debut in a film called 14 Hours, which is perhaps may fall under a noir or not kind of category. It's up to the audience. It has a number of noir tropes, not all of them, not conventionally noir. I think it's a film noir. He's credited on IMDB as having a bit part in it, but it says uncredited. So I watched it recently because I'd never seen it before, so I didn't see him in it. I don't know if his scene got cut or if perhaps he was doing extra work in it, so that it can be harder to spot someone. But nonetheless, he's credited on IMDb as being uncredited, I should say, but it's still listed in his filmography, and his name is there. So there you go. His first time in front of the camera in a feature film was in 14 Hours, and his first line of dialogue in The Night Holds Terror, I wrote it here, his first line of dialogue was, "All right, take one look in my direction, fella, and I'll kill you now. It's that simple." I mean, that is as noir, that is as noir gets, this direct threat. But the reason I feel he was so perfect for film noir movies is he was such an intense actor. Not only was he intense and he could really get angry, he also could be psychotic, which is just beyond angry. And particularly in The Night Holds Terror, where he's like a sociopath. I mean, he's the leader of this gang who's kidnaps this man, holds the family hostage, holds the guy hostage, I should say. They go into the family's house, they stay with them overnight until he can get all this money from the husband and whatnot. But he is cold as ice, and he is truly psychotic and intense in the film. So not only did he have the ability to be angry and intense, he could also be very cold and threatening and mean. And it's perfect for a film like The Night Holds Terror. And then not long after this film, The Night Holds Terror, he was in Crime in the Streets, which, again, people may not consider film noir. It's one of those noir or not films, more of a social consciousness type of story. But then again, even in that film, if you would consider it noir, he is this juvenile delinquent. He's the leader of a gang in that. And the way he's scared, to me, he's scary in that. The way he treats his mother, the way he treats his brother. He has killer instincts, and you believe that he will truly kill in that story, same as you believe it in The Night Holds Terror, because again, he has that threatening manner that is really scary and intense. Now, what's interesting there is that he plays a type of character who eventually sees the errors of his ways, like you would see in a lot of film noir movies, where characters don't appear to have a moral center and then realize that what they're doing is wrong. And it's this moment of consciousness, which again comes towards the end of the film, where he realizes that he needs help, and that where his anger comes from is this upbringing that he's had, and the fact that the father had left, and so on and so forth. But it's a stunning performance, and it's a film that's hard to find. However, you can see he also did it live on television. You can get this DVD, which is great. Television's Lost Classics, and these are all films that he starred in. And Crime in the Streets, the TV version was directed by Sidney Lumet. The feature film was directed by Don Siegel, but it's also really, really good, the live television version. So I highly recommend getting this out. So we have those qualities of the criminal, the psychotic, the man who sees the errors of his ways, and then on top of that, which of course you see those characters in a lot of film noir movies. On top of that, we have the doomed protagonist, which he had played that kind of guy in The Killers, the remake of the which came out in 1964. The original, of course, was 1946, and he plays the part. Not that it's the exact same part. The names are different. The story is strongly resembles the original, but it's also has its share of differences. He's a race car driver in the second one, in the remake, which in the original, the Burt Lancaster's character is a boxer, but he plays the doomed protagonist beautifully as well, and it's because he also has this quality of being quite very sensitive. He just had that combination of intensity and someone who could be truly ferocious, but also someone who could be truly vulnerable and sensitive. And here, we see him off the top. He's doomed from the beginning and he's doomed at the end. But I thought the scenes, the femme fatale in that is Angie Dickinson's character, the woman that he falls in love with, and which of course leads to his downfall. But what's interesting there is that they have a couple of scenes that are quite romantic and sweet, and he doesn't play it in a conventional sense where someone may be suave or seductive or confident. He's certainly confident, but there's a scene when they're kissing and they're lying on the floor, and he's being sweet to her, but it's sweet in the way that maybe someone, just a regular ordinary guy, may be sweet. Someone who's just not quite comfortable showing those kind of feelings to a woman, but it's all there. And that's another thing about him, is that he was such a regular guy. He just happens to be deeply creative as well, but he could hang out with anyone. And I think that's why he was so good at depicting ordinary people in his films, which is what he truly cared about exploring in the films that he directed. And you see that in this film, because he is the doomed protagonist, often is just a decent person who gets pulled the wrong way and makes some bad choices and falls into crime, which we see in the remake of The Killers. But he's just a regular guy. You don't get the sense that he's anything but that. And I think you don't really see that in romantic scenes often. People will try to be seductive or charming or suave, and he doesn't do that at all. I mean, he's just totally normal and regular, and I think that's very relatable. So we see that kind of character that he was perfect at playing. And even in the films that he directed, I mean, you can never say that any of his films fall into any genre, whether it's comedy, drama, Neo-Noir, which would come, in the 60s and 70s, or any kind of crime film. He was a humanist filmmaker, so he was interested in individuals, and they're so complicated that they don't feel like they fit in any kind of a box. You can't do that. However, he did use certain tropes that would fall into certain categories, of course, like in The Killing of a Chinese Bookie. That is very much like his take on a film noir. It's a neo-noir. I would put it in the neo-noir category. Of course, it still has that deeply complex characters and is ambiguous, and he's got some scenes that just go on these long durations that truly challenge the audience, and you see those similar things in film noir. However, of course, it's much rougher and harder for the audience, which is what his films were like. He never makes anything easy for you or anything to entertain you. He truly puts you through an emotional experience and includes you in what it's all about. He doesn't give you all the answers. And so, but in that film, Ben Gazzara plays the guy who runs the strip joint. He gets pulled into crime. It's a very neo-noir like. So it's really wonderful to see how his filmmaking evolved, where he went from like character study, and there were always character studies, but again, he was using things from drama, even surrealism in a film like Opening Night. And then Gloria was not a neo-noir, but perhaps people could consider it that. I don't feel that it's a neo-noir, but it is, again, a crime film only in the way Cassavetes could do a crime film, because because it's more about the relationship between Jenna Roland's character and the little boy, but she is a criminal and works in the mob and everything. So again, he's playing with genre tropes. And then the very last film he directed, which he took over from the director who they let go of on the film. He was either let go or he quit. But this is Big Trouble, so he took this over, which was a loose remake of Double Indemnity. So there you go. It just seems like film noir always followed him in one way, shape, or form. But a lot of the films, outside of the noir that he would do later on was crime films. Not always, but he did a number of crime films in Italy as well. And then the TV show that I mentioned, Johnny Staccato, he directed 5 episodes, and it utilized a German expressionistic style of filmmaking, sometimes. And if you watch the ones he directed, there are a number of scenes where he's utilizing German expressionism. It's very stylized. Again, and now he's the detective, and he's a good person, and he's someone who is all about morals and principles, and he's a good detective. It reminds me of some of the detectives Bogart played in film noir movies, and it's just a testament to how good of an actor he was, because like I said, he can be the psychotic killer, he can be the doomed protagonist, and he could also be the detective, the good detective who is out to for justice. What's interesting in there is that sometimes the people that wound up being criminals were people that he knew, or friends of his, or he admired something about them. So you always see this element of him being torn sometimes in some of the episodes, where he really hated to see some of these people wind up guilty because he liked them in some way, shape, or form. His acting was just so full of behavior, and so rich and so full. And again, he had all these great qualities about him that lent itself to so many of the kind of people you saw in film noir. So to me, he was perfect in many of the film noir movies that he was in. And if you haven't seen any of them, I highly recommend checking them out. That is The Night Holds Terror, that is Crime in the Streets, but the feature film and the live television version. It's The Killers, the remake from 1964, and the television series that he did that was just on for one season, which is Noir Television. I think many people would consider it Noir Television. Johnny Staccato, I highly recommend checking that series out as well. So comment below. Let me know what you think of John Cassavetes in film noir, how you felt about his performances, and what do you think of the films that he directed? Because he's one of my favorite filmmakers, and I think that the films that he directed are some of the greatest films ever made. So if you haven't seen them, I highly recommend checking them out as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. And if this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that, and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. Again, click the like button below and leave a comment. Let me know what you think of John Cassavetes in these film noir movies that he was in. Thank you so much again, everyone, and I will see you in the next episode.